The sun had barely crested over the rooftops of Sycamore Hills when Marcus Langley stepped outside with his coffee in hand. He wasn't looking for drama. All he wanted was to shoot a few baskets before waking his kids for school. But where the familiar thump of his basketball should have echoed, there was only silence. The hoop, his solid, regulation-sized driveway basketball hoop, was gone, vanished. At first, Marcus thought it was a prank. Maybe the neighbors' teenagers were messing around again. But the base, heavy and sand-filled, hadn't been tipped or dragged, it had been moved with precision. Wheels on the bottom suggested someone rolled it away, not in a panic, but with purpose. He opened his phone, tapped into the security camera feed, and scrolled back to 4:13 a.m. There she was. Karen Whitmore. Floral nightgown, pink slippers, hair tied back in a tight bun. The same Karen who had complained 3 times to the HOA about unsightly recreational equipment. The same Karen who lived 2 houses down and liked to measure grass blades with a ruler. She was dragging the hoop across the street, struggling with every step. Huffing, pausing, then charging forward, like she was on a mission from the mayor himself. And she wasn't even trying to be discreet. She stopped mid-theft to sip from a thermos she'd stashed in her garden wagon. Marcus watched the footage again. This time with the audio turned up. Her voice, barely audible, was muttering something about neighborhood uniformity and rules they don't enforce. He paused the video, jaw tightening. She hadn't just taken the hoop, she'd stolen it under cover of darkness. Convinced she was the hero in some twisted HOA soap opera, he sent the clip to his wife, Taylor. The reply came instantly. 3 words. Post that. Now Marcus hesitated. He wasn't the type to stir up internet mobs, but then he remembered the way Karen had smirked during the last HOA meeting, wagging her finger at him in front of everyone. He uploaded the clip to a local neighborhood group with a short caption, "Anyone seen my hoop?" Karen might have. The reaction was immediate. Dozens of neighbors commented in disbelief. Some laughed. Others were furious. A few even offered to bring their own hoops over in solidarity. But the best message came from his neighbor, Charles, a retired Marine with a sharp sense of humor. $10 says she tries to blame you for it. By noon, the video had over 1,000 views. At 3:45 p.m., a beige SUV pulled up to Mark's driveway. Karen stepped out, sunglasses on, arms crossed. She didn't walk up to the door. She just stood by the curb like a judge ready to deliver a sentence. Marcus stepped outside. Calm, steady, recording again, this time on his phone. Karen pointed to his driveway and said flatly, "That hoop violated community guidelines. I moved it because the board failed to act." He didn't interrupt. He just let her speak. "Let her dig," she added. "And by the way, filming me without my consent is harassment. I've already contacted the police." At that moment, Taylor opened the door behind Marcus, holding her laptop. The video played loud and clear. Karen's voice, her muttering, the dragging sound, the thermos break. Her face twitched, her jaw locked. "I was trying to restore order," she snapped. "You committed theft," Marcus said, barely raising his voice. "And you did it while muttering to yourself in Crocs." The camera caught it all. She turned on her heel, shouted, over her shoulder, "You'll regret this," and stormed off to her car. But Marcus knew something she didn't. The internet had already picked a side. The story had just begun. 3 days passed without a single bounce on Marcus's driveway. The hoop was still missing. But now, something else had taken its place. On silence in the neighborhood. People weren't avoiding Marcus. They were avoiding the chaos brewing between him and Karen. Even the mailman sped up when approaching their stretch of Sycamore Hills. It wasn't until Thursday morning that the next move arrived. Not from Karen herself, but from 2 uniformed officers knocking on Marcus's door. He opened it casually, coffee in hand. "Mr. Langley?" the taller officer asked. "We're here following up on a harassment complaint." Marcus didn't flinch. He motioned them inside and offered coffee. They declined. The shorter officer flipped open a notepad. "Says here, a resident is claiming you filmed her without permission and posted the footage online to humiliate her." Marcus arched a brow. "Would you like to see the footage she's talking about?" They exchanged glances. He led them to the living room, pulled up the security footage, and hit play. Karen appeared on screen in her pink slippers, dragging the basketball hoop like she was recovering stolen art. The officers watched in silence. When the clip ended, the taller one exhaled. "This is your property." "It was sitting in my driveway." "Camera, on your property." Motion activated, installed years ago, not hidden. HOA even approved it. The shorter one scribbled something, then muttered, looks more like a theft report than harassment. Exactly, Marcus replied. So should I file that? The officers left a few minutes later, apologizing for the inconvenience. As they pulled away, Taylor stepped out from the hallway, still in pajamas, eyebrows raised. She really thought that was gonna work. She's not done, Marcus said, eyes fixed on the street. That was just her warm-up. The next day, a new post appeared in the Sycamore Hills community group. Karen had typed a long, furious letter titled The Importance of Neighborhood Standards. In it, she ranted about unauthorized sports equipment, male aggression, and online mobs. She even mentioned certain individuals weaponizing their front lawns. But buried in all that noise was a threat. If the board won't take action, I'll handle it myself, as always. It wasn't just a dig. It was a warning. Marcus didn't reply, but someone else did. His neighbor, Lily Nguyen, a quiet graphic designer who rarely posted. This woman tried to fine me for planting sunflowers. I'm Team Hoop. The replies snowballed. More neighbors chimed in. Karen had apparently filed at least 17 separate HOA complaints over the last year. Everything from garden gnomes to wind chimes. What began as a neighborhood curiosity was becoming something bigger. Unity still. Marcus had a lingering thought, what had she done with the hoop? On Saturday, curiosity got the better of him. He took a walk past her house, phone in hand, pretending to scroll through emails. No sign of it out front. No sign in the yard, but as he walked past the side alley between her fence and her neighbor's garage, he caught something glinting in the corner of his eye. A black rim, partially covered by a blue tarp. Marcus paused just long enough to get a photo, then kept walking. He didn't knock. He didn't say anything. He just texted the photo to Taylor. Her reply, I knew it. Karen had claimed it was discarded, but there it was, on her side lot, stashed like a trophy. By the next morning, Marcus uploaded a second video. This one wasn't security footage. It was a calm narrated walkthrough of his neighborhood, ending at the alley with a blurred zoom on the hoop, captioned, found it. The tone wasn't angry. It was dry, disappointed, surgical. The views tripled. That afternoon, Karen's SUV was gone. By evening, it was back and the hoop wasn't. Gone again. The video's comments section blew up. Some users begged for updates. Others offered legal advice. A few were sure Karen would come unglued soon. They were right. Marcus received a certified letter on Monday. From Karen's attorney. The envelope sat on the kitchen table like a time bomb. Cream-colored, thick, and stamped with the name of a law firm Marcus had never heard of. Taylor circled it with her eyes like it might burst open. Marcus finally tore it open. Inside was a 3-page cease and desist letter. It accused him of online defamation, character smearing, and intentional psychological stress inflicted upon Ms. Karen Whitmore. It demanded he take down all videos and issue a formal apology to the Sycamore Hills community. Taylor read the letter twice, then laughed. This is her I stole your hoop and now I'm suing you for noticing defense. But Marcus wasn't laughing. He knew what Karen was doing. It wasn't about the hoop anymore. It was about control. She wanted silence. She wanted the attention off her and the pressure off the HOA board, which had conveniently still not addressed the original complaint. That night, he called Charles Grant, the retired Marine who lived across the street. Charles had lived through enough neighborhood nonsense to have a good read on people like Karen. She's bluffing, Charles said without hesitation. She's trying to intimidate you before this blows up in her face. I don't think she realizes it already has. Marcus said. The video had just passed 150,000 views, but something about the letter bothered him. Not the legal threats, he could handle that, but the signature. It wasn't a local firm. It was from 2 towns over, with no connection to HOA law. The more he stared at it, the more it felt off. That suspicion was confirmed 2 days later. An anonymous message popped into Marcus's inbox. No name, no greeting, just a PDF attachment labeled HOA Minutes April 2023. He opened it. Inside was a transcript of an HOA board meeting that had never been shared with the community. It was supposed to be public record, but the file had been hidden. And on page 2. There it was. Karen had proposed a new amendment banning all portable sports equipment visible from the street. She claimed it was about aesthetic integrity. The rest of the board rejected it. Too extreme, too controlling. But here's the twist. Karen had still typed up the amendment as if it passed, and filed it into the board's newsletter, as a footnote, months ago, quietly slipped in like a grocery receipt. It wasn't enforceable, but it looked official enough that most homeowners wouldn't question it until now. Marcus uploaded a new video. This one not about the hoop, but about the minutes. He read them out, word by word, then held up the false newsletter and circled the phony amendment. She didn't just take my property, he said. She tried to make it illegal after the fact and lied to everyone's face. By nightfall, a digital wildfire had erupted. Neighbors were furious. Parents who'd told their kids they couldn't have a hoop were now wondering what else they'd been tricked into believing. A few even began digging through their own newsletters, comparing versions. One family, Brian and Danielle Stone, found that Karen had altered a landscaping regulation too, telling them solar lights weren't permitted. They were. A secret message. Board emerged, where neighbors shared their own run-ins with Karen. The stories painted a disturbing pattern: forged notes, bogus citations, whispered threats. The next HOA meeting was already scheduled, but now it had a new theme: exposure. And someone else leaked another piece of evidence. This time, it was a photo, Karen, months earlier, loading a different resident's lawn flamingos into her car. The timestamp proved it wasn't a one incident. She had a history. One that had stayed quiet until Marcus's hoop pulled the thread. The folding chairs were set up in neat rows beneath the rec center's buzzing fluorescent lights. The quarterly HOA meeting of Sycamore Hills had never drawn more than a dozen residents. But tonight, the room was packed. Marcus sat near the middle, arms folded, silent. Taylor sat beside him with her phone in her lap, already recording. Across the room, Charles stood against the wall, scanning the crowd like he was preparing for a briefing. And then came Karen. She walked in with a stack of folders. Her posture perfect, her outfit pressed. She wore a beige blouse with gold buttons and a smile that barely hid her tension. People stopped whispering the moment she entered. The air turned tight, heavy. Karen approached the front, clearly expecting the floor. She adjusted the mic and began. Good evening, neighbors. I know there's been a lot of chatter lately, misinformation, frankly, about certain policies and procedures. I just want to take a moment to clarify. Marcus didn't move. He didn't need to. A wave was already rolling through the crowd. Karen held up one of the folders. As a member of the board for the past 5 years, I have always acted in the best interest of this community. Yes, I submitted an amendment to reduce clutter on our streets. Yes, I may have personally relocated a piece of equipment that had been previously discussed that you stole. Someone muttered from the back. Karen's eye twitched. She pressed on. Because the board failed to enforce its own rules. That's not rebellion. That's leadership. A murmur ran through the room. Disbelief. Some stifled laughs. That's when Charles stepped forward. I have a question. Karen. She froze. Please wait until no. You've had the mic long enough. Karen clenched her jaw but nodded. Charles turned to face the room. Can you explain why this document? He held up a printed version of the leaked April minutes. Shows the amendment failing by a 4-1 vote, yet the newsletter says it passed. Karen blinked. I must have. You wrote it in. Charles continued. After it was rejected, you inserted it quietly and hoped no one would notice. That's not policy. That's fraud, she stammered. That was a formatting error. Was it also a formatting error when you told the Stone family their solar lights violated HOA code? Or when you removed Marcus's property from his driveway at 4 a.m. without permission? Or when you filed a legal threat against him based on a rule that doesn't exist? The room fell dead silent. Karen looked around, searching for support. No one moved. Even the board president, a soft-spoken retiree named Evelyn, finally stood up. Karen, did you alter the newsletter without board approval? Karen hesitated. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Yes or no? Evelyn asked. Again, louder this time. Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. I may have adjusted the phrasing. Evelyn sat down. Effective immediately, Karen Whitmore is suspended from the board pending formal review. The room erupted not in shouting, but in applause. Measured, deliberate applause that filled every corner of the rec center. Some neighbors stood up, others began pulling out their phones. Karen backed away from the podium, face blank, hands shaking. She turned toward Marcus, eyes darting. You did this, she hissed. Marcus didn't respond. He simply stared back, as calm as he had been since the day the hoop disappeared. She stormed out of the building. The echo of her heels lost under the sound of the crowd. As the meeting adjourned, neighbors came up to Marcus one by one. Some shook his hand. Others offered apologies. Many just said thank you. It wasn't just about the hoop anymore. It was about a pattern system that had been manipulated for years. And one man who had the patience to expose it without ever raising his voice. But Marcus knew better than to believe it was over. Karen didn't lose quietly. Karen didn't return home that night. Her beige SUV was missing from the driveway. Her porch light off, the house dark. Some thought she'd left town. Others believed she was regrouping. Marcus wasn't so sure. People like Karen didn't disappear, recalculated by morning. Something had shifted. An official-looking email hit residents' inboxes at 6:03 a.m. The subject line read, Sycamore Hills HOA, Emergency Code Compliance Updates. The email came from a new domain, not the HOA's usual address. But it was signed Community Enforcement Chair, Interim. Karen hadn't left. She'd made her own title. The email listed new violations, decorative rocks, mailbox flags, unapproved patio furniture, and warned of fines if issues weren't corrected within 48 hours. Most neighbors were too stunned to respond. But Marcus knew what it meant. Karen couldn't control the board anymore. So she was trying to control the street. By noon, printed versions of the email were taped to mailboxes all along the block. A couple of neighbors found notices folded into their garden beds. One even discovered a yellow envelope wedged under their doormat with the words, Final warning, written in red pen. It was pure theater, and Karen was the only one playing. Marcus stayed quiet. He didn't post, didn't record. He watched, and then, like clockwork, the real escalation came. That evening, a sheriff's deputy pulled into Marcus's driveway. Marcus stepped outside calmly. Mr. Langley, the deputy said, we received a report that you've been harassing a resident by flying a drone over her backyard and recording without consent. Marcus blinked. I don't even own a drone. The officer gave a knowing look. I figured, but we still have to log the complaint. Did she provide any footage? Proof. Only a written statement. Taylor joined Marcus on the porch. She handed the deputy a flash drive. What's this? He asked. Footage from the past 72 hours. For exterior cameras, full angles, no drone, no invasion of privacy. Just Karen, trespassing again. The officer accepted the drive, nodded, and left without another word. They didn't need to explain anymore. The story had already spread. Later that night, Charles texted Marcus a blurry photo. Karen, alone in the park, across from the neighborhood entrance, standing beside a fold-up table. A handwritten sign read, HOA Informational Booth. Respect the rules. She had flyers. She had a binder. She had a plan. She's not letting go, Marcus muttered. But the neighborhood had had enough. The next morning, dozens of residents showed up to the park, not to join her, but to surround her. Brian and Danielle brought their kids. Lily arrived with cupcakes. Charles brought his Bluetooth speaker and played a medley of 90s basketball anthems. No one said a word to Karen. They just stood quietly laughing, casually talking, a unified front of calm resistance. Karen packed up within 15 minutes. As she wheeled her table away, someone caught it on video. It was uploaded that afternoon with the caption, Sycamore Hills HOA, Community Comes Together. By nightfall, Marcus received another anonymous tip. A USB drive left in his mailbox. No note. He plugged it into an old laptop in the garage, just in case. Inside was a folder titled Karen_audio. Recordings. Karen on calls, boasting about how she bent the rules to scare certain families. Recordings of her mocking elderly residents, even one where she bragged about dehooping Marcus before sunrise. The files were time-stamped, raw, and unedited. It was exactly what the board had needed, and possibly exactly what law enforcement needed to. Taylor leaned over his shoulder, listening. She just sank herself. Marcus didn't smile. He knew better. Not yet, he said. She's got one move left. The sun had just begun to set when Marcus's phone buzzed. Another neighbor, another message. It was Lily. Check your shed now. He didn't ask questions. He walked out back, flashlight in hand, past the basketball hoop newly repainted by his kids and toward the small, padlocked shed at the corner of his yard. Nothing looked off at first glance. The lock was still there, undisturbed until he noticed the faint scratch marks around it. Someone had tried to pry it open. He unlocked it slowly. Heart already ticking faster. Inside, his tools were untouched. Lawn equipment, still there, but a plastic storage bin where he kept old files, warranty paperwork. Original home inspection, HOA records was open. Some documents missing. He stepped back into the yard, scanning the shadows. That night, he reviewed every second of security footage. At 3:14 a.m. the previous night, Karen appeared, wearing dark clothes. No slippers this time. Gloves, a flashlight wrapped in red. Cellophane to mute the beam. She had jumped the side fence. She'd tried the lock. Then, after nearly 6 minutes, she gave up, looked directly into one of the cameras, and whispered something. Marcus, enhance the audio later. You think you've won. You don't know anything. The next morning, he called the board president, Evelyn. She came over in person. Together, they reviewed the footage. Neither said a word for the first 5 minutes. She's not well, Evelyn finally whispered. And she's not done. They agreed it was time to get the sheriff involved again. But before the deputy could even make the report, the next twist hit. Karen had filed a temporary restraining order against Marcus. The accusation that he'd followed her car on foot, tried to intimidate her with organized community harassment, and that she felt unsafe in her own neighborhood. Court hearing was set for 3 days later. Marcus couldn't believe it. She broke into our shed, Taylor said, pacing. She stole documents. She lied in illegal filing, and now she's flipping the script. She's cornered, Marcus replied. That's when people like her start lighting matches. But he wasn't alone anymore. Dozens of neighbors had his back. They came forward with statements, security footage, emails, even printed newsletters with dates that didn't match Karen's versions. Still, the hearing would come down to one thing: credibility. And Karen was already preparing her performance. On the day of the hearing, Marcus arrived in a simple gray shirt and jeans. Calm, no fanfare. Taylor sat beside him, her hand gripping his. Karen walked in 15 minutes later, sunglasses, silk scarf, black skirt, and a noticeable limp. She leaned heavily on a cane no one had ever seen before. She's staging this like a courtroom drama. Taylor whispered. Karen took the stand first. She told the judge she had been psychologically battered by neighborhood mobs. That Marcus had turned her life into a viral circus. She wept when describing the loss of her privacy, her reputation, and even referenced being followed at night. The judge listened, stone-faced. Then Marcus presented his side. Security, footage, time-stamped videos, the false amendments, the manipulated HOA records, and finally, audio recordings of Karen bragging about bending rules, mocking neighbors, and the early morning break-in attempt. The judge didn't need long. Restraining order, denied. Instead, the judge ordered the case forwarded to the county attorney's office for review of possible criminal charges. Karen sat frozen, as if her internal script had just ended with no alternate lines to read. Outside the courtroom, Marcus said nothing. He didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He just walked to the parking lot and opened his phone. That evening, he uploaded one final video. It didn't show Karen, it showed the neighborhood. Kids riding bikes under the hoop, neighbors waving. A simple, peaceful cul-de-sac, returning to what it had always been until someone tried to rule it. The caption, "What happens when you stand your ground?" 2 days after the court hearing, the neighborhood was still quiet. Suspiciously quiet. Karen's house looked dark most nights, but her porch light was always on like a trap, left out to see who wandered by. The basketball hoop had become a symbol now, a kind of silent monument to the battle Sycamore Hills never saw coming. Marcus was ready to move on, but that wasn't in the cards. On a warm Thursday morning, Lily Nguyen knocked on his door with her phone in hand. "You need to see this," she said. She showed Marcus a real estate listing that had just gone live on a short-term rental site. The address, Karen's, but the listing wasn't under her name. It was hosted by someone named Marcy Wynn. The photos clearly showed Karen's living room, her kitchen, even a side view of the exact area where Marcus's stolen hoop had once leaned. What stood out most was the description: charming private space with full backyard access and quiet neighbors. There was no mention of the HOA. Marcus narrowed his eyes. "That's not legal," he said. "She's not allowed to lease without board approval." Charles confirmed it within minutes. Renting out property in Sycamore Hills, even temporarily, required written notice to the HOA, insurance proof, and a $500 annual registration fee. Karen had never submitted anything. The neighborhood group chat lit up. It wasn't just a one-time thing. Brian and Danielle had seen unfamiliar cars coming and going from Karen's place for weeks, sometimes different guests every few days. A neighbor on the corner, Mrs. Holloway, even admitted to hearing loud music and slamming doors late at night, which she had assumed were just Karen's nightly routines. But now it made sense. Karen wasn't just breaking rules, she was profiting off them by noon. Marcus and Taylor were standing across the street with Charles, watching as a young couple pulled suitcases from the trunk of a rental car and walked right into Karen's house. She didn't answer the door. The guests had the code. Taylor took a breath. She's running a full short-term rental business in an HOA that doesn't allow it. Let's see how she explains that, Charles said, already dialing Evelyn. The board president didn't hesitate. Within hours, an emergency notice was sent out. Karen was under formal investigation for unauthorized leasing and potential HOA insurance fraud. But what came next was worse. That evening, one of the guests out-of-state travel wandered through the neighborhood looking for the community pool. He knocked on the Langley's door, asking for directions. Marcus kindly redirected him. Before the man left, he casually added, "The host said the HOA doesn't really care about anything. Told us to ignore any complaints." Taylor froze. She said that. Yeah, even mentioned a basketball thing that happened, said she got the guy in trouble. The guest waved, unaware of the tension he'd just walked into. That was the final straw. Marcus opened his laptop and uploaded a new clip. No drama. No music. Just the facts. He showed the rental listing, Karen's driveway, the footage of the guests arriving. He didn't mention her name. He didn't need to. The community knew. Neighbors shared the video privately this time. Among friends. Among families who had been pressured by Karen in the past. People started coming forward with stories that went beyond lawn signs and newsletters, some about fines that were never backed by board votes, others about strange deductions during HOA billing periods. It all led to one conclusion. Karen hadn't just bent the rules. She'd been living outside them for years, using them to bully others while building a secret operation behind the scenes. And now, the full weight of the HOA was preparing to land on her. A quiet tension blanketed Sycamore Hills. Everyone sensed it. Like the air before a thunderstorm, Karen's rental scheme had been exposed. The board had called for a full audit of her activity, and the once feared enforcer of neighborhood rules hadn't been seen outside in days. But the final piece hadn't fallen yet, until a phone call came. It was Evelyn, the HOA board president. Her voice was calm, but tight. "We found something." Evelyn explained that, after the hearing, Karen had been asked to return her board-issued storage keys and access badges. She hadn't. So Evelyn and two other members had gone to the shed themselves, the one behind the rec center where old signs, forms, and archived newsletters were kept. There, tucked away in a box labeled Community Correspondence -2022, they found a locked file binder with Karen's name on it. Inside were dozens of folded papers, handwritten complaints that had never been filed, fake violation letters drafted but never sent, and several HOA checks with no attached invoices. The name on each of those checks, Marcy Wynn, the alias Karen had used for the rental listing. Marcus sat at his kitchen table with Taylor as Evelyn read the details. His stomach turned. She was cashing checks, Evelyn said, from a ghost vendor she invented. Over a year, Taylor covered her mouth. She was paying herself for fake landscaping, door repair, even tree trimming. Marcus was silent. The hoop, the false fines, the phony complaints, they were all symptoms of something bigger. This wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. It was full-blown fraud. Later that night, Marcus walked into his garage and pulled out an old bin he hadn't touched in years. It was full of paperwork from when he first moved in, closing documents, inspection reports, and HOA packets. In the bottom, he found the welcome packet Karen had hand-delivered herself. Inside was a sheet of approved vendors, with a note in Karen's handwriting. "Always use Marcy Wynn for yard work, fast, cheap, HOA, preferred." He added that to the folder by morning. The board had turned everything over to the county fraud investigator. Karen still hadn't come outside, but she was watching. That afternoon, as Marcus brought the recycling bin to the curb, her SUV crept down the street and stopped in front of his house. The window rolled down slowly. Karen sat behind the wheel, her expression unreadable. "You ruined me," she said flatly. "You did that yourself," Marcus replied. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then, with a smile that didn't touch her eyes, she said, You think? They'll thank you. You embarrassed them. You made them all look weak. I didn't expose anyone but you. Karen said nothing. Then, without warning, she opened the door and stepped out. She walked across Marcus's yard, not to the porch, but to the basketball hoop, and then, slowly, deliberately, she gripped the rim with both hands and gave it a tug. It didn't move. She tried again. Marcus stood still. She turned to him, trembling. This is what broke me, she whispered. That stupid thing. You broke yourself, Marcus said. Karen didn't reply. She walked back to her car. No yelling, no drama, just silence. By nightfall, the SUV was gone again, but this time, it wasn't coming back. A week later, the board confirmed it. Karen had sold her house, moved out, vanished, no announcement, no goodbye. The listing had been removed from the rental site, the phony vendor name wiped from the system, and all her amendments and records formally rescinded. Life in Sycamore Hills returned to something it hadn't been in years: peaceful. Kids played under the basketball hoop again. Neighbors gathered without fear of fines. Even Charles finally put out the pink flamingos he'd kept hidden in his garage, just for the occasion. And one afternoon, as Marcus stood watering his yard, a new family pulled into Karen's old driveway, a couple with a toddler in a car seat and a basketball rolling around in the back. The man waved across the street. Hey, HOA here, as bad as they say. Marcus smiled. Not anymore. Final call to action in story. Karen thought she could rewrite the rules, twist them to fit her world, and bully anyone who got in the way. But all it took was one person to stand their ground and shine a light. If you've ever dealt with someone like that, just know, you're not alone. And sometimes, all it takes is one hoop to start the whole truth bouncing back.